right, Gail Fugit, President, CEO of the Advertising Research Foundation, here with the
Martin Sorrell, CEO of WPP.
Martin Sorrell.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Martin
Friday morning at CES.
Exactly. Friday
They've all
morning.
gone. They've all gone.
No, well, not everyone.
No, a
there
few of
was
us
still
are still.
They
Yeah.
were gambling as I left my hotel
Really?
this morning.
This morning at
Hoping
5
people
o'clock in the
getting
morning.
a few rounds in.
It's insane.
Some
The
cocktails.
zoo.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was looking at last year's interview and discussion we had, which was around the corner in the steakhouse, and some big fake chinchilla chairs. And
Charlie Palmer's.
Exactly. It was exactly 1 year ago today.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay.
It
all
was
right.
January 8th.
Consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds.
Well, I hope not. So I wanted to kind of start.
How did we do on the predictions?
I
can't remember what we predicted.
That's where we're going to start.
Oh, gee whiz.
We're going to start with that. All right.
You're going to remember
all right,
what we
so
said.
You predicted slow market growth.
Right, which is fine.
Right. World economy dominated by China and the U.S.
Yeah, which is still true.
Right.
Although China, everybody wants China to fail, so
yeah, and some recent news
knocking
there.
the hell out of China. Yeah.
Yeah. You said clients would be short-term focused.
Which they were.
2, focused on cost. Not
Which they
focused
are.
enough on, yeah, in ways we maybe wouldn't have predicted, right? Between the measurement challenges and all the reviews, what's your take on that?
I think on the measurement thing, if I went back to, I think I'm right in saying that this time last year we were noodling with our investments in Comscore and Rentrack, and there was increasing mounting concern. You were getting the stuff from Viacom in particular, from Philippe Doman about Nickelodeon and MTV not being underrepresented. We didn't have the bots sort of fraud issue, if I can put it that way. It was strongly, but the bots
ad
certainly
blocking.
We weren't talking about ad blocking. We were sort of a little bit concerned about viewability, but we didn't have Keith Weed coming out and
didn't know
his
it would
three
explode.
V's, his
Yeah.
3 V's,
Yeah.
value, validity, and viewability. But generally, I think, in fact, we certainly this time last year, Erwin, Brian Lesser, Erwin Gottlieb, Brian Lesser, myself, and others were focused on some of these issues that we're talking about. And we certainly had laid out the companies that we wanted to make investments in or become part of WPP. Xaxis was certainly this time last year looking as though it would hit $1 billion. I haven't seen the December numbers, but it'll hit just a smidgen under $1 billion, but it's really on the money. And now Brian Lesser's moved up to Group M. So we've got this.
Yesterday.
Yeah, and Brian Gleason has taken over, and we'll. But what's really interesting about that, it gives us a tremendous focus on digital programmatic in North America, and of course across the whole of Group M, which is 25% of our business. So I think
I think you did pretty well.
We did okay, yes, but I mean I think.
And you said, and the last one was big box retailers would slow down.
Well, which big time, and that's going to continue. In fact, brick and mortar is really under pressure. You're seeing consolidation. Sainsbury's, for example, trying to or are supposed to be in discussions with Argos. We've seen a management change now.
We've seen a lot of management change in big box retailers.
Yeah, and it will continue. We've seen a change at Target this week.
Walmart.
I think a 32-year veteran has been replaced. So there's a lot of changes taking. Macy's restructuring. So a lot, and that's emblematic of the rise in proximity stores. One thing, and then e-commerce the other. So those two coming together. We saw that in China, and we saw that in Indonesia and Thailand. I think probably what made me touch on it last year was that this time last year I'd just been to Indonesia and Thailand and was amazed that proximity retailing and the e-commerce pressure on big box had started to occur in those countries. Those were countries you thought where it would occur, but it would take some time. So I was quite amazed by that.
Inflection point.
Yeah.
All right, so then the other thing we really talked about, and I really want to get into this, is Mad Men versus Math Men.
And that's got one more intense.
And where we're headed, yes.
Yeah, well, and you go around CES, if you ever get onto the
Hard to get there.
convention.
You're too busy
Well,
networking.
it's hard, yes, because everybody's doing things that they could do anywhere else in the world. I mean, you might as well go to a beach to do this. But
it's a little more fun in Canada.
So we'll see. Yeah, we'll see. I'm sure we're going to do Erwin's tour this morning, but I'm sure we'll see again how important data, smart data, I guess, is the snazzy way of talking about it as opposed to big data. How smart data is becoming more and more important in the home, in the car, in health, in particular. Obviously, the rise of drones, a lot of controversy with that as to, I mean, you can actually sit in a drone, apparently. Somebody showed me last night there's a drone that will take 200 pounds, so you can actually go up in one and go up to 11,000 feet.
Are you going to do that?
No, I'm not light enough yet. Maybe if I am actually light enough. I suppose I could get in one. I could do that maybe, but maybe some people would like me to go and go up in one and never come down again.
Here, step into this drone.
But we're talking about the perils of drones and what the trouble they're going to cause. It was Peter Chernin, I think, said to me earlier this week, the first drone that brings down an aeroplane, that will be the end of drones. Yeah. Anyway, so I think we are seeing the rise of smart data, which makes our strategy. One of the interesting things sort of came up yesterday when we were doing our reviews with the new media companies. It's interesting that the old media companies, the legacy media companies, do not do these sort of reviews with us, and I'm urging them to do this.
That is interesting.
It is interesting, and I think it's because it's the sort of mindset, if that's the right way, or the mind of the disruptor or the new company, that they're more focused on how they can accomplish change.
Are they more open to input and having more dialogue?
It depends on how successful. There's a sort of inverse relationship with flexibility and success. The more successful they are, the more arrogant they become. We suffer from that too.
It's legacy success.
And so the new media companies that I won't name them, but who have become more successful or think they become more successful, have become more difficult to deal with. There's an interesting thing that I think a penny dropped with me yesterday morning, although it should have dropped a long time ago. I think because of the nature of our strategy, we are inherently more difficult for new media companies to deal with. The reason I say that is, firstly, we've taken an independent route on technology. We had this farcical, I'm going to be aggressive, it's a Friday morning.
Might as well.
This farcical situation where Omnicom and Publicis used to say, we're going to partner with Google and Facebook. When they were talking about getting together, they said, oh, no, we're not going to partner. We're going to get together and we're going to be, implicitly a big enough force to do it on our own. Then they split asunder, they couldn't get it together, although they should have done. I mean, if they believed it was the right thing to do, John Wren and Maurice should have stepped aside and let the thing carry on. I mean, it was good for clients and good for people. It was only because they couldn't decide who was going to be finance director they should have got on with it. But the interesting thing is that they tried to create a force together, and then when they split asunder, they had no strategy on that. We have always been very consistent that we wanted to provide a technology stack, what I call, and Brian O'Kelly called last night at a dinner, the third force. And the third force is the third force to Google and DoubleClick and Facebook and Atlas. And that third force means that we take a very independent view, which I think is beneficial, obviously, to our clients, agnostic view about that technology stack. I mean, the simple truth is that Google and Facebook want to monetize their inventory. They are media owners. They are no different to Fox or News Corp or Disney or Viacom or CB. They are, exactly. They're trying to monetize their inventory. So that's one thing.
And on mobile.
The second thing, more relevant to what we're talking about, is that 25% of our business is first-party data. So we are a data company, and therefore owning, controlling, managing data on behalf of our clients or for our clients is critically important. So there are naturally two sort of ways that we come into conflict in a way with the new media companies. They are frenemies, as we've said before. We did $4 billion of business with Google last year. We did $1 billion with Facebook. I think, although Facebook won't tell us, Google will, but we're their largest customers. And our growth rates have been very considerable. So Facebook's gone from about 650 to $1 billion. Google's gone from 2.9 to 4, but that 4 includes Essence now, which is a part of our group, which was, I think, about a 500 million. So we've got a big relationship, but the fact that we're technology agnostic and we have our stack and we're committed to that, the fact that we are a first-party data company means I think we are different to Omnicom, Publicis, IPG, Havas.
Well, you have more. Look, the research infrastructure, I think, is one of the things that makes a really big difference.
Well, it does make I mean, on the top line, we get somewhat criticised we're not growing fast enough. Our custom data business, is under pressure, even in the fast growth markets.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute, because that came up yesterday. Do you think that research companies are going to lose their way and not be able to grow or take that leadership role in the way that they need to?
Nielsen does pretty well. If you look at its market value performance, it's done pretty well. I mean, the shareholding structure.
And they're coming out with new solutions.
Hopefully, or maybe not so hopefully. They're trying to, and they're being pushed by Comscore and Rentrack, etc., and indeed in the background, and in fact internationally ourselves. No, well, if you look at the market performance of Nielsen does pretty well, but has this monopoly in the US, and consistently increases prices in the US to the chagrin and annoyance of media owners and clients, and we hear, and part of the antipathy that is in the marketplace is driven by the strength of their market position in the US, and obviously the link up that we tried to stimulate in relation to Rentrack and Comscore, which we hope will be approved by shareholders at the end of this month, and then we move forward pretty quickly, quicker than people think, I think.
But kind of about more than tracking, it's insights and analytics, as we were discussing yesterday.
Yeah, but the point is that GfK's performance and Ipsos' performance has not been good. The market performance, I mean, in fact, they're at lows. They're at 2-year lows in terms of share price. And the market really, I think, analysts are looking at the top line performance, organic growth, and saying it's not strong enough, and with which I would agree. I wouldn't disagree with that. Having said that, the fact is that 10 billion of our $20 billion of revenue is in media and data. Now we call them media investment management, data investment management, and one of the things we'll be doing in 2016 is bringing those two businesses much closer together. We've already initiated a close relationship between them because we see leverage on behalf of clients with media owners, and both new and old. Coming back to the first part of the question, when I was talking about our technology difference and our insight difference, that means that we're going to be much more aggressive in terms of trying to secure advantages for our clients in the use of data.
How about creative? Do you feel, because that's something that I think you uniquely bring in terms of how your portfolio of companies have been put together. Can big data, can you create great creative insights out of big data analytics?
One of the things that came through when they allowed me to go to these media reviews that we saw
they allowed you to go.
They allowed me to go, and I sat there and listened.
Could you participate? Or?
A little bit, yeah. They let me do something at the beginning and something at the end usually, but they do all the talking and the thinking and the doing. And
what did you learn from being there?
Well, I learned from being there that it's all changed. It's all flipped. In other words, it used to be that using the word creative is dangerous because you're using it in the terms of Don Draper. It isn't. I mean, you can have creative researchers or data people.
I'm using it in the terms of making the consumer's heart beat and connecting emotionally and building brands.
But everybody's involved in that.
Your prediction of top line growth versus managing costs.
Yeah, but everybody can be creative. So you must use it in a broad, because when we use the word creative in our industry, or it can, we tend to think of it in terms of Don Draper. It's much broader than that. It can be somebody in a Wonderman. We had our lunch yesterday with Willow Bay, Wonderman. It can be somebody at Ogilvy One. It can be somebody at Hogarth in production. It can be somebody at Millward Brown. It can be somebody at Taylor Nelson, whatever it happens to, TNS, whatever it happens to be. So you have to use it in the broadest. And I think the answer is that data can. So when you look at these pitches, to your point, what was interesting is the whole process is sort of inverted. It used to be that the narrowly defined creative agency would present planning.
Yep, storyboards.
Out of that comes a big creative idea, which is then applied willy-nilly across.
Usually the last one presented.
Yeah, and media fell off the back of the wagon often because there wasn't enough time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now it's completely the reverse. And now it's true that a lot of those reviews I attended were media reviews. If they were creative
That's
agency
interesting
reviews,
in and of itself,
yeah.
though, sorry.
Yes, no, it is, but that's where the big money's spent. You know, look at WPP. You don't know what Omnicom or Publicis or whatever do in terms of their billings because they don't provide an audited figure. But you know with us that in 14 it was 76 billion. Let's say in 15 it was 80 billion. That figure is what that's what drives the company, not the $20 billion of revenue. So what's that interesting? In those reviews, what's happened is we present data. We say, this is what's happening, Mr. or Ms. Client. Here's what we think is the media solution to that, because it's become very fragmented. And here are a range of alternative creative solutions which vary by medium. That's why, whether the medium
then
has
you
become
have more of a conversation about it.
Yes, and then so data is critically important, and we know, we have the profiles at KBM through Wonderman, which now links very, very closely with Group M. We have the profiles of, we know you. We don't know it's Gail, but we do know what you do. Probably we know more about you than you do yourselves. Now, it's quite surprising actually what we can have, which raises all sorts of issues that you're well aware of, like privacy and the same. But therefore, so you start at an individual sort of base, household base, addressable. We talked about addressable as well as programmatic here at CES with Xaxis and Group M. And what we're trying to do is to be much more precise and save money. So in the film industry, which is really interesting because I attended a couple of film pitches, they spend about 25% of revenues on advertising and marketing. If you can refine by just a small amount the amount they spend, that has a massive impact on the bottom line. Packaged goods companies do 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13% so that's still big. But for film companies, if you can shave or even make more effective a little bit of spending, it has a dramatic effect.
So your predictions, like you were just about dead on, but how over the course of your career have you dealt with failure?
We fail every day.
How did you deal with it? What's your philosophy about it?
Well, you have to pick yourself up, dust yourself down, and start all over again. I mean, I guess the best of the answer to that.
Did you go back and analyze?
Well, the biggest problem we've ever had is, you're continually analysing decisions or thinking, or what you didn't do or what you did do. So it's a continuous process of readjustment. But the biggest problem we had was in, although we have problems every day, every week, every month, every year, the biggest problem was 1989, or no, so not 89, 1991, 92. After Ogilvy, which was in 89, when we were too highly geared, and we had this convertible preferred stock, which I thought was equity, but I forgot somewhat stupidly that in a recession it's not equity, it's debt. So we were too highly geared. So that was the biggest sort of life-threatening experience we have. Now we've had reverses. We win clients. We win more, thankfully, than we lose. We keep more than we lose. But the simple fact is you don't succeed. We didn't win Procter this year in the US. We won a small piece of Coca-Cola. We won General Mills.
You won General Mills.
As you know, we won L'Oreal.
Yes.
So we had much more success. In fact, top of the new business. Recma came out with dotty figures, and we got them to correct them, which they're in the process of doing. So we've come at the top of the heap in relation to that. But having said that, there's always more to do. And what we're focused on, it comes back to the differences actually. And I think the CS has brought that into sharp focus. I think for me, traditionally, talent and price differentiated agencies, they will continue to be critical issues. But technology, data, and content are the three areas. We're doing very well in that area. I think we're establishing some clear blue water.
It's a pretty major shift.
It is, and that we've got to rev up that. So that comes back to what I said about with that interesting sort of enlightenment, I think, which yesterday morning, which is that when the penny dropped, because of what we're doing on technology, because of what we're doing on data, we are different. We have to differentiate ourselves even further. And so we have to build positions which we can leverage on behalf of our clients in those three areas, and that's what we're going to continue.
How do you decide what to place bets on? Well,
it is very difficult.
Pretty aggressive about that.
We're aggressive, but we don't want to go over the top. So we wouldn't do what I call the plonker strategy. We're not going to plonk 4 billion down for Sapient and see it go X growth within 1 quarter. So we go Globant. We Globant, which is the Sapient lookalike, smaller, $300 million of revenue, but growing extremely fast. Argentinian.
So you look for capabilities.
Yes, and then we don't go crazy. So we bought 20% of Globant pre-IPO.
So they are bets.
Well, yeah, I don't like the use of the word bets. So it's appropriate where we're sitting, and it should be bets, but investments, which seems to be a little bit more sane. Which seems to be a little bit more sane. But we invested in Globant pre-IPO. It's tripled after. I'm quoting it because it's been successful. We've had failures, but that's then we can help them with their strategy. We can help them attack clients that we think are appropriate, bring in talent that we think are appropriate, rather than risking the enterprise. I mean, Publicis clearly has got some challenges. They were the biggest loser in the media reviews, lost about $2.5 billion net, according to RECMA, and all of us, including our competitors, have benefited as a result of that. Now, everybody wins some, loses some.
Are these reviews over, or is this
No, they're going to continue. They're going to continue. Well, actually, the interesting thing about the RECMA data was that actually last year, if the RECMA is correct, and there is some flaky data there, but if they're correct, the total value of the reviews, according to them, was the same in 15 as it was in 14. So there wasn't any tsunami.
Why the big flurry?
Well, because I think people, the press have got to write something about the analysts. No, it was big, and it was important. I think it was because of when you have advertisers such as P&G, such as L'Oreal, such as J&J, such as Coca-Cola, all reviewing, such as General Mills, all reviewing at one and the same time, it is a little bit odd. I don't think it's odd. I think it's a reflection of that low growth, low inflation, no pricing power, focus on procurement and cost. And I think it's with us to say. I don't want to be gloomy about it, because I don't think it is gloomy, because you can find your way through it. Because if an economy is growing at 3, something's growing at 6 and something's flat.
Right.
So if you can find the 6s, life is a little bit better.
That's your point about top line, focusing on top line, differentiation.
Yeah, and we know from the data that Brand Z does, and we're going to come out with more data actually on this. We know that stuff that BAV does, that those companies that invest in the top line win. And in fact, you see it with the 3G. The 3G companies are now starting to invest. We've seen this. Thank goodness, and they've realized that it was that zero-based budgeting is a good short-term strategy.
Well, you said yesterday, and I just loved it, that when you went to Harvard Business School, they were doing zero-based budgeting.
Hal Janine used to sit in a bunker underground with his lieutenants going, it's nothing new. I mean, in a way you could say that nothing is new in that sense, but the balance, in my view, has got out of kilter. And the reason is that we're too short-term focused, and the reason is, that's why we joined the long-term club with McKinsey and Dow and BlackRock. Larry Fink's writing to the chairman of S&P 500 companies say, think about the long term. L&G, I think, have now stopped, Legal & General have stopped quarterly reporting. I don't think that stopping quarterly reporting necessarily does it. It certainly sends a message. But boards have got to be more supportive, I think, of long-term thinking. Now, having gone through Lehman in 2008, the consumers were affected. I think corporates were much more significantly affected by what happened in September of 2008 than consumers.
I agree with that.
And it's changed them. And it's made them very, they're sitting on $7 trillion of cash. So they're more 2014, the S&P 500 bought back and dividended more than they earned. In other words, they shrank. And in 15, I don't know what the number is, but my guess is that they shrank again. That buybacks plus dividends were greater than retained earnings. So you get into this situation, and we see it in our own industry. Omnicom's strategy is very different to ours. If you go back over the last 10 years, Omnicom buys back about $500 to $1 million to $1 billion of stock. Over the last 10 years, 5 years, even 1 year, against the S&P 500, they've tracked it or actually underperformed it. And the reason is, I think, contrasting it, far be it from me to criticize it, it's just fact. we've taken the view that we have to be, we have to invest in horizontality, which is getting people to work together. We have to invest in fast growth markets, digital, and data. And they don't. They've taken a very different strategy.
And those were your evergreen pillars when we talked last year. What do you see as your biggest success from 2015?
Well, I think, staying on track, I guess, is that hopefully, we haven't seen the December numbers yet, but in October, November was strong. No, staying on track, I think. The biggest problem is that when you get all these things that happen, 2015 was an exhausting year for our people because you take these media reviews. Some of them we were the incumbent, not all, but some of them. So you have to make the
train. You have to drop everything.
We kept, and in fact increased our Unilever business, but we kept on track. So we have to run the trains on Unilever, for example, and do pitches.
You're going to keep the ones you have.
They were actually effectively a pricing review at the time, not a full pitch. At the same time, very different. We're in the midst of a VW review, so you have to run the VW account at the same time. Now, the people who aren't incumbents, we weren't the incumbent in General Mills or L'Oreal in those countries, although we work for L'Oreal around the world. In those reviews, we could attack without having the burden which Publicis and IPG had of running a business. It is much more difficult. It puts tremendous strain. So you have two teams, one running the business, one thinking about, and then of course, if you're the incumbent, it's very difficult because the client says, well, why didn't you do that before? If the pricing changes or if the nature or scope of the services change, they say, well, why do we have to go through a review? Why weren't you proactive? So it's very difficult if you're in the incumbent.
Those clients.
Yeah.
So I think it's very interesting. You chatted about it yesterday in predictions around Insights 2020 that you've come out and it's been published and said that Hillary's going to win.
Yes, I think.
So say more about that. And also your stand for women. I think it's been a little bit misinterpreted in some of the press, but I know that you're
because the word aggressive.
I know that you're making strides within your organization.
Yeah, we haven't done enough. I said that with Will Obey. We haven't got. She asked me about diversity, and not just asked me just about women. Now, if you take women, there are more than half of they're better at doing a lot of the stuff that we do than men.
Why?
Well, because I think they organise themselves much better because they have much more responsibilities than men, usually, and therefore they have to organise themselves. There's pressure on them to organise, the family part of their life as well as their business life, and therefore they waste less time. I think emotionally, I think they're better at dealing with clients actually. In some
Interesting.
They're awful things.
How do you see that? How does that come across?
Well, just in terms of results and people. The only thing I raised yesterday.
More agile, or?
Well, the only thing I raised yesterday, which might get me into trouble, was that I think that was off the record. This is on the record. Was that sometimes I see women managing other women. There's some difficulties there, but
I'm sure
that
should
men
definitely be on the record. All men get along with each other, though, right?
No, they don't. So I think. And we've got Charlotte Beers has been running the X Factor course. We're sort of broadening that, not just for senior levels, but for and that's working extremely well. But at senior levels, so-called senior levels of business, is only a third. So we clearly don't have enough women at the top. Now, why I think Hillary will win, just linking it back to this, which I think is important, is I think people underestimate the power in the voting booth of the first female president.
Interesting.
And I think that which will raise then.
What do you think it is?
Raise the question about when we have the first Afro-American or Hispanic female president. That would be quite interesting. Or the first Hispanic president. And so that's going to be really interesting. But I do think that in this election, I do think she will win, irrespective of who the Republican candidate.
Then what are the implications of that? Do you think?
Well, I think it's good news.
That will help.
I think that yes,
women
absolutely
move up in
just like
the ranks?
Trudeau has an equal cabinet, and that has an impact, certainly, if not in Canada, not just alone in Canada, but elsewhere. Yes, I do. I think it'll have a massive impact. I think Angela Merkel in Germany has had Margaret Thatcher in the UK had an impact. Probably too early. If you had Maggie Thatcher today, it would be even more so. No, I do. I think massive, and I think that's the electoral point. Electorally, I think men will vote. Maybe a vast number of people disagree with it, but men will vote for Hillary because of that. and I think it's interesting, it's come up in the campaign just recently, in the last few days, and I do think it is going to become more and more important, and I think it is a really significant factor, positive factor. Some people it doesn't play well with. I heard a woman on Fox last night saying she wouldn't vote for Hillary, but highly critical. But having said that, I think generally it'll be well received.
Yeah, it can be polarizing. Yeah. I mean, true of any candidate, right?
That's right. Well, particularly, yes. But amazing. I mean, explain that. It's extraordinary.
Would have a hard time.
I think it started as, it's great for the Trump brand. It's now mushroomed, and I think even he is surprised at what's happening.
I come from a state where Jesse Ventura, the wrestler, was voted in governor, right? It was a vote against.
Yes.
My husband voted for him. I was just mortified. So, these things happen.
How did he do in the end?
He did pretty well, frankly.
He was
just a practical, he was a real guy, and he was just a real practical guy.
Is Donald practical and a real guy?
I'm not drawing that parallel.
But we'd vote for Ivanka, actually.
Stranger things have happened. I'd back you up on that, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, so predictions for next year, because we're going to be here January 8th, 2017.
I hate to be boring, but I think it's to be much of the same. I mean, I don't think, we've obviously got the quadrennial impact of the Olympics, which I think will be very good. You've seen what Globo have done. They've gone along with the IOC, which is really good news for the future Olympics. We've got the European Football Championships, which will help a little bit. And last but not least, we've got the FIFA problems to sort out. FIFA. But UEFA will, that championship will be good. And then we've got the presidential elections themselves, which sort of tightens up the markets. But so I would expect advertising to be, growing at GDP rates, which nominal, maybe 3.5 to 4, real, maybe 3 to 3.5. I think the World Bank has taken down their numbers already, so we might be in 2.5 to 3 territory on real and 3 to 3.5 on nominal.
Big box, what's going to happen?
Sorry?
Big box?
That's going to continue, and the
now
the
that they've sorted out their management,
the vice, the vice will turn, because the legacy problem there of big box is so you have to shift to proximity, and you have to expand e-commerce. And you look at China, which you would think would be slower to adapt. It's actually ahead of the curve. So e-commerce has become fundamentally far more important in China. Yeah, because of the mobile phone. And they leapfrogged the PC, so they didn't have to go through that intermediate stage. So I think those are the clients are going to, the pressure on clients is going to intensify. ABI's market cap is 200 billion. Coke is 180, Pepsi is 140, Mondelez is about 80. Kraft Heinz, the mini-me in the 3G constellation is 80 or 90. So the reason I'm drawing attention to that, Nestle is about 250, Procter is about 220.
A lot of management change.
I mean, these are companies which are all, looking, I think, at their competitive positions, worrying about, what's happening in their categories. You've got the disruptor at one end of the spectrum, Airbnb, Uber, the 3G at the other end, and then the activist investors at the minute. So the pressure on clients in an environment which is slow growth going to continue, no pricing power, inflation is the problem, or lack of it, and rise of financial procurement, that pressure is going to intensify. So as far as the agency is concerned, integration, consolidation of clients is going to continue, more SAB Millers and with ABIs. You're going to see more consolidation in media. Is Viacom worth 15 billion or more? Is CBS worth more than 21 billion? Is Netflix worth 55 billion? Netflix is announced going to go into 130 countries. You just have to turn Netflix on, actually. A colleague of mine is based in Singapore, just got on Netflix because Jay just flicked the switch, and he's on as of yesterday or the day before. So we're going to will Rupert come again for Time Warner or somebody else? I think that was rumored in the last few days. So there's going to be big changes in the traditional media landscape. Will Vice be successful?
So that's kind of tectonic plates, right?
Yes, very much so. And 16, I think, will be quite an important year in the context that either thinking or doing. So you may see some big shifts What's interesting is that when you look at TV, linear TV, and what's happening or may not be happening with the linear TV, the Roberts family and the Murdoch family are probably going to be the only two who are going to be there, let's say in 5 or 10 years' time, either this generation or future generation. They control their companies. They don't conform to quotes unquote, I think, which good corporate governance, which I think actually is bad corporate governance. The companies that really do well, I mean, if you've got a lunatic in charge of the asylum, you've got a problem. But as long as the management is good, if they have control, they can make longer term decisions. And you see that with Rupert, you see that with Brian Roberts, you see that with Ford Motor Company. I mean, they can. Some people criticize that, but I actually think it's good. You see that with Zuckerberg and Facebook. You see that with Google. Now, of course, if the management loses its marbles, then you have a problem. And there have been cases of companies where that's the case. But it's really interesting. It confounds good corporate governance, but actually in terms of performance, it's better.
I mean, look, at the ARF, we believe that brands are built in the brain, and we don't believe that television is declining. We really believe that it's being
viewing is being
reinvented.
Of screens. Yes,
right?
Exactly.
And it was very interesting because in the course of the week, I've had the chance to talk to, I think it will ultimately be almost 22 people.
Yeah.
And it was a great gift of talking to Johnny Wada, who runs IBM marketing, right? It's been there a number of years, and his prediction was a reinvigoration of the golden age of television this year.
I hope he's right. That would need clients to take the long-term view, and where I hate to disagree with a client, or even sort of marginally. I hope he's right. I just feel that the environment is so difficult.
So I wanted to hear from you about it.
It's unlikely to change.
Different vantage point.
I think I'd agree with him totally, not in relation to 2016, but in the long term.
Yeah.
My view is in the long term, he has to be right, which is, we know when we look at Brand Z data that for the last 10 years, if we invested, I put it in financial terms, if we invested in the top 10 brands that we rank, but these are the companies that grow their top line fastest. If we invested in them, we would outperform the MSCI by 300% over the last 10 years. So investing in companies that invest in brands who by definition, the biggest determinant of share price appreciation, of TSR, the biggest component is top line revenue growth, like for like growth. That's what the analysts look at. I don't think they stress margins enough because we balance that. We do go for growth on revenue and we go for margins. We're not just buying market share. But, fundamentally, the biggest determinant of TSR is what the retailers call like-for-like store growth. And where I think John is dead right, and he's dead right in the principle, I think the timing is going to take longer. There, in a way, have to be failures before, and as the vice sort of tightens in terms of growth, there may be more failures. That may get people to think a little bit more about the long term.
That's why I'm asking about failure. I think that's a really good point.
Well, yes, but interestingly, the people who are changing their marketing organizations more are not the ones that are doing well, who should be, or adequately. It's the people who are really in trouble. The burning platform creates
that's true.
The desire for change, and they have to change. So we had some examples recently where we were not the incumbent, where we were successful, where it's because the company was in trouble, and the other where we weren't successful because I think the CMO thought didn't want to change.
And your point about the CMO is an important one. It comes down to leadership. My experience over my career is there were what I refer to as wartime leaders and peacetime leaders.
Yeah.
And there were really excellent leaders that knew how to lead a turnaround. And then there were others that
it's a bit like, and I think it's like CEOs. There are CEOs who can start things and not run things, and there are CEOs who can run things who can't start things. And what we try to do at WPP, for good or evil, is to do both. No, I think that is right. But the fundamental problem with the CMO is they used to last, when we were last talking, probably 18 months. Now they last 2 years. That's a third longer,
full years.
But it's 2 full years. That's a joke.
That turnover is going to kill us.
Yes. Yeah, and if you're in the agency, what's the biggest threat to you is when the CMO changes.
Well, absolutely, because the first thing they do, and I went through this because marketing was my client, right?
Yeah.
I was a support group. every single time they come in and they want to change everything.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, and I remember I go back to HBS every 5 years, and I remember the first time I went back after the first 5 years, there was a professor who had monitored change in positions and what people did, and he monitored actions on the vertical axis against time, and for the first sort of 30 days, very little. Then there was a tremendous surge of activity around 3 months.
Yeah.
And then about a year later, there was another massive surge. So so you're right. Because they have to create change. Now, usually inside organizations, if you're on a fast track, you last 3 years, right? I mean, not last 3 years. After 3 years,
it's more of a 3-year cycle,
find your way to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Second year, sort of you put your strategy in. Third year, you tighten it up.
Yeah.
And then you say, no, what am I going to do next?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're sort of stodgy and you're stultifying.
No progress.
And so that's another problem. But so it is difficult. But I think, coming back to John's comments, I think he's right directionally. I think it's going to take a longer time.
So that's a good place for us to kind of tie a bow.
Right.
I think that was a little bit of a cap on what the insights were around CES this year. There wasn't like the one big.
Well, I haven't seen the floor. No, I mean, people. When I'm talking to people, drones. Obviously, people are amazed by that. They're amazed by the changes in health. The Internet of Things and a home.
Yes.
Mobility. I mean, cars, automobiles. I mean, last year there were 17 to 18 manufacturers here. I first came to CES really because Alan Mullally launched a car here with Microsoft and Sync. Mark Fields had an exhausting schedule here, amazing schedule here for the last, I think, 3 days. And Ford have been very prominent here, which is our largest client. We're delighted to see. But big things. Singapore has got a bid out, an RFP out for driverless zone. Oslo is talking about having a car-free zone in the middle of Oslo, which I think by 2019, which I think a lot of mayors are going to start thinking about.
So next year's CES.
3D printed cars. What does that mean?
Right.
Mark Reed said to me that I think it's Milan, they put in a car-sharing scheme, and automobile sales in Milan or around are down by 10%.
Went down.
Yeah. So interestingly,
changing business models.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Sir Martin, thank you
very
so
much. Hope
Really
to see you next year.
I'm counting on it.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thanks.